You're listening to the Radio Wammo Breakfast, only on Kiwi.
Well, very shortly, a rare vintage single malt Scotch whiskey is to be auctioned in New Zealand. A chance to secure the ultimate, perhaps, Christmas gift for the whiskey connoisseur. What is it? Well, it's the Glenfiddich Vintage Reserve 1975. And to talk with us more about this, and perhaps learn a few things from Frankie Walker, who is the Lion Nathan Luxury Spirits Ambassador and Glenfiddich expert as well. Morning to you, Frankie.
Morning. Hi, Glenn.
How many of these bottles actually exist in the world?
520, and then by the end of tonight it'll be 519.
I suppose as every month goes by, that number decreases, no doubt.
Yeah, and that's part of the great story about this. There ain't much around. You've got to be quick to snap it up, but that's part of what makes it so special, you know?
Yeah. Now, since 1975, that's an awful long time for a bottle of anything to hang around for. Where have they been all this time?
Well, they've been in Scotland. I mean, I think a couple of things to realise is that, I think if my math's right, that's 34 years ago. 34 years ago, there wasn't that much call for 34-year-old whiskey. So, it's a relatively modern phenomenon, our desire, which is led by people like you and me and whiskey drinkers, for rare and aged bottles. So the fact that it's still around is really quite special, particularly when you consider that 2% of that whiskey in any given barrel is lost every single year to what we call the angel share through evaporation. So you do 2% compound interest for 34 years, and you soon find out you need a lot of whiskey to start with.
This is true. So how much whiskey did it start off with in 1975?
Well, I'd have to do the maths. I don't know, but barrels and barrels. To end up with one barrel, really you need barrels and barrels, and they top them up every sort of 4 years to reduce the surface area and prevent excess evaporation.
Yeah. So, and you say that it's only more recent demand that over the past few decades has demanded that we have older and older whiskies. Is that because of the collectability of it, or is it actually because of the taste?
I think the thing to realise is that the world that we live in now, you go into bars around the country or liquor stores around the country, you're more likely to see more brands of single malt whiskey than you are blended whiskey. And so we kind of have a bit of an illusion that there's a lot more single malts around than there really are.
Yeah.
But if you look at the statistics, 93% of Scottish whiskey sold in the world is blends. So, brands like Johnny Walker, things like that, and just 7% are single malts. But that's really growing, and single malts have only been around really about as long as that bottle has been around. So the early 70s, Glenfiddich were the first distillery to take their single malt whiskey to the world. Until that point, the Scots were of the opinion that no one outside Scotland could handle the full flavour of single malt.
Right.
So you put that in context and you see that it's really, last sort of 30, 35, 40 years that single malts have grown in popularity, and they really have grown in popularity.
Is that the essential difference between a single malt and a blended whiskey, is that in the single malt you're going to get that fuller flavour?
I mean, some people say that blends, they're just there to create something a little bit more neutral, a little bit more palatable. I disagree. I think there's some great blends out there, some very flavoursome blends. But I guess as a generalisation, yes, I think it's fairly accurate to say that single malts are going to give you a little bit more delivery. Yeah.
Looking at this 1975 vintage, so it spent most of its time in the barrel. When was it actually bottled?
I believe it was bottled. It's just this year.
Right.
It was bottled. So the story is that Glenfiddich was the first single malt distillery to open their doors to the public and to have a visitor centre, which has been going since 1969 now. Glenfiddich realised that one of the things that people love about whiskey is the fact that, a single malt distillery, a bottle of single malt whiskey captures the essence of a particular place in time, and in this case, a particular year, the year 1975. So just like a vintage wine, there are different characteristics year by year, and so this is like a snapshot of history. They open their doors to the public, and it's a smart thing to do because it means people can go to the source.
Yeah.
To celebrate that 40 years on, the malt master, David Stewart, who's the longest standing malt master in the Scotch whisky industry, he's been with us about 1 million years, he together with 5 past and present employees of the visitor centre, so people who've been doing tours at Glenfiddich for sort of 20, 25 years, they came together, they went down into the cellars at Glenfiddich, They pick 3 barrels at the beginning of the day and drew whiskey from all 3.
Yeah.
And they then, kind of with David Stewart consulting on the side, giving advice, the 5 of them sat and debated for a very long day, as far as I can tell. I've seen some videos.
Yeah.
And eventually picked the winner, which was Cask 22,000. Just 1 barrel. It's a first use sherry butt, so just used once for the sherry industry, which will absolutely really impact the flavour of the whiskey. They decided that was the one. That was their hands-down winner. 520 bottles as a result, and just 2 for New Zealand.
Just 2 for New Zealand.
2 for New Zealand. One of which, I have to be completely honest, so one of which we're going to drink tonight.
Yeah.
And then the other one we're having a media tasting session tonight. And then the other is going under the hammer. We're auctioning it in time for Christmas. All proceeds going to Red Cross New Zealand. So 7th of December via webs. So we'll see how much that fetches.
It is extraordinary, this idea, as you say, it's a snapshot in time. It was 1975 that it was put into the cask.
Yeah.
But you think about the world has revolved around this cask. It's been sitting in this, darkened sort of warehouse, and it's been sitting there all that time. And the world has changed, politics. There's been a couple of generations.
Yeah, absolutely. I got born. I was born the next year. I mean.
Yeah, I was born 4 years later. So 3 years later. Yeah. Yeah. So, extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And then what do you make of this idea of drinking something that's older than yourself? I mean, that is quite an odd concept.
I guess so. I mean, I'm in the business of I'm all about celebrating and drinking responsibly, of course, but drinking. A great bottle of whiskey like that, I think, deserves to be drunk. I think it deserves to be drunk with some reverence and some appreciation, but I think, I'm all for it.
And some respect.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's older than you.
And some ceremony and,
Yeah. Have you heard the story about this barrel of whiskey that went missing, or that stayed down in Antarctica after Shackletons ill-fated one of his expeditions down there, and they're now going down and drilling for it. They're trying to find it.
I have heard the story. It's a great story.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you talk about a snapshot, that really is, not just the bottle on its own. It coupled with the historical context. It's just such a great story,
isn't it? So it's literally over 100 years old. This
early 1909, 1907, something like that. That they reckon it went missing. Probably wasn't a very old whiskey to start with.
Okay.
It looks like, but yeah, I mean, for sure, it's at least celebrated its 100th birthday. Fairly recently.
Do we know what the cold does to a whiskey?
Well, I mean, cold. I mean, let's have a look at it. So, cold will obviously freeze water. Slightly impure spirits or spirits with a lower alcohol volume may freeze. But most decent quality whiskey, like most decent quality vodka or any other spirits, if you pop them in the freezer, they'll be fine. They'll actually just be really delicious and go really syrupy.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that when they find this bottle encased, or in fact cases, I think there's 2 cases encased in ice.
Yeah.
And when they crack them, and if someone's brave enough to open them, that they're still as delicious. I mean, whiskey doesn't age in the bottle, so it's not like a wine with a cork in that's sitting there maturing or potentially going off. You should find that drop is just the same.
Wow.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And would have to be some of the rarest in the world, I'd say.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can't. I mean, that's the thing. 100 years down the line, how much of that is going to be left, if any?
Yeah.
And then what's the price on something unique? I mean, that's one of the.
And the Angels wouldn't have had anything of it.
Angels can't have gone near that, I'm afraid. No sealed sign, no evaporation through bottle. So yes, fingers crossed.
Well, excellent. Well, this bottle of 1975 Glenfiddich Vintage Reserve goes under the hammer when?
7th of December, I believe.
Excellent. All right.
And you can bid on that just on the website.
Webs.co.nz is where you
correct.
head. Nice one. Thanks very much, Frankie, for telling us all about it.
Pleasure. I'll think of you this evening as I raise my glass and try it. There's so little of it. I haven't even been able to try it, so I'm going to be trying it for the first time. I reckon. Think of me around about 7 o'clock this evening.
I'm going to see if I can sneak by. Might see you there, Frankie. Cheers.
All right, Glenn. Have a good day. Thanks.
That's